She stood silent as the doctor publicly mocked her, the deaf nurse, useless in emergencies. She picked up her notepad from the floor and walked away. Minutes later, black SUVs surrounded the hospital. Armed agents stormed and demanding one person by call sign, Sentinel. No one understood. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy these stories, consider subscribing. They had no idea the woman they dismissed had just saved every single one of them. The supply room at St. Matthias Metropolitan Hospital smelled like antiseptic and cardboard. Pale fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting sharp shadows across rows of shelves stocked with gauze, syringes, IV kits, and surgical gloves. It was 6:47 in the morning, and Senna Kale was alone. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, each box aligned at a perfect 90-degree angle, each label facing forward, latex gloves on the left, nitrile on the right, size small, medium, large. She did not need to think about it anymore. 16 months of this routine had trained her fingers to work on instinct. She wore pale blue scrubs that hung slightly loose on her thin frame. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, no stray strands. Around her neck, a lanyard badge swung gently as she moved. The text read, Senna Kale, Support Services. No photograph, no department code, just her name and a vague title that told you nothing. The door opened behind her. She did not turn. She did not hear it. A nurse entered, dropped a crumpled piece of paper onto the cart beside Senna, and left without a word. Senna only noticed the paper when she reached for the next box of supplies. She unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, nearly illegible. Third floor needs restocking. Trauma Bay 2. Now. She smoothed the paper flat, folded it once, and placed it in her pocket. Then she continued organizing. There was a rhythm to her work, a cadence that required no sound. The world moved around her in silence, and she moved through it the same way. By 7:15, she had loaded her cart and was pushing it through the hallways of the emergency department. The ER was waking up. Nurses clustered around the station, sipping coffee and reviewing overnight charts. A resident yawned as he typed notes into a computer. Paramedics wheeled in a patient on a stretcher, calling out vitals that Senna could not hear but could read on their lips. Systolic 90/60. Heart rate 120. Possible internal bleeding. No one looked at her as she passed. She was a fixture, part of the architecture. The woman who restocked supplies and emptied bins and kept the machinery of the hospital running in ways that no one thought about. She reached the third floor and began her work. Trauma Bay 2 needed gloves, gauze, saline bags, and sterile drapes. She restocked each item methodically, checking expiration dates, ensuring everything was within arm's reach of the surgical table. A doctor entered the bay while she worked. He glanced at her, then away, already focused on his phone. She finished and moved to the next room. The break room on the second floor was nearly empty when she entered at 8:32. Two younger nurses sat at a table near the window. Senna poured herself a cup of coffee from the communal pot. It was lukewarm and bitter. She added 2 sugars and stirred slowly. The nurses were talking. She could see their mouths moving, their expressions animated. One of them laughed. Senna sat at a table on the opposite side of the room and pulled out a small notepad. She began writing supply notes, items that needed reordering, shortages she had noticed. The nurses did not lower their voices. They did not need to. One of them gestured toward Senna without looking directly at her. The other leaned in, smirking. I don't get why they keep her. She can't even answer a phone. HR said it's a diversity initiative, whatever that means. Senna's pen paused for half a second. Then it continued. She wrote the word gauze, followed by a quantity. Her face remained neutral. Her fingers, however, tightened slightly around the pen. The plastic creaked. She finished her coffee, placed the cup in the sink, and left the break room. The nurses did not notice her exit. They were already talking about something else. At 9:03, Senna was wheeling her cart down the main corridor when she saw him. A man in his mid-30s, wearing jeans and a gray jacket. He stood near the waiting area, checking his phone. Visitor badge number 4471 clipped to his collar. His name, according to the badge, was Dorian Sev. Senna slowed her pace. Not enough to be noticeable, just enough to observe. She had learned long ago how to watch without being seen watching. It was a skill most people never developed because most people did not need it. Dorian Sev's posture was off. His left shoulder sat lower than his right. Compensation. His jaw muscles flexed rhythmically, a micro-clench that occurred every 4 seconds. Stress. Response. His eyes scanned the room in a pattern that had nothing to do with looking for someone. Exit, window, hallway, nurse station, exit again. Senna's expression did not change. She continued past him, pushing her cart toward the elevator. But her mind had already filed the details away. Visitor badge, 4471. Gray jacket, left shoulder drop. Scanning exits. She returned to the supply room and locked the door behind her. From her locker, she retrieved a tablet. It was sleek, black, unmarked, not hospital property. The login screen required a fingerprint and a 6-digit code. She entered both. The interface that appeared was not a medical system. It was something else entirely. Clean, minimalist, designed for efficiency. She navigated to a reporting module and began typing. Subject: Dorian Sev. Visitor badge: 4471. Anomaly flagged. Behavioral markers observed. Postural compensation. Elevated stress indicators. Environmental scanning pattern inconsistent with civilian visitor behavior. Awaiting secondary confirmation before escalation. She submitted the report, locked the tablet, and returned it to her locker. Then she resumed her work as if nothing had happened. By 9:23, the ER had exploded into chaos. Multiple trauma patients arrived within minutes of each other. A multi-car accident on the interstate, 3 critical. A construction site collapse, 2 patients with crush injuries. A cardiac arrest from a nearby office building. Alarms sounded. Doctors shouted orders. Nurses sprinted between bays. The organized calm of the morning shattered into controlled pandemonium. Senna moved through it like water. She did not need to hear the alarms to know what was happening. She could see it in the body language, the frantic gestures, the way people ran instead of walked. She could read the monitor screens, oxygen saturation dropping, blood pressure falling, heart rate spiking. She delivered supplies before they were requested. A nurse reached for a tourniquet and found one, already placed beside her. A resident needed saline and turned to find Senna holding a bag, ready. She moved with an efficiency that came from observation, not instruction. No one thanked her. No one had time to. She did not expect it. At 10:47, Dr. Merrick Holst entered Trauma Bay 3. He was a senior trauma surgeon, 52 years old, with silver hair and a commanding presence. The nursing staff respected him. The residents feared him. He had a reputation for brilliance and an equally strong reputation for impatience. He saw Senna near the crash cart and waved her off with a dismissive flick of his hand. "Not here. You can't hear the monitors." Senna stepped back without protest. She had learned that resistance only made things worse. Holst did not wait for acknowledgement. He was already barking orders at the team, his focus entirely on the patient in front of him. She moved to the next bay and continued her work. But she had felt the sting of his dismissal. It was not new. It happened often enough that she had stopped reacting visibly. But the sting was still there. At 11:43, Senna took her lunch break. She sat alone in the break room, eating a sandwich she had brought from home. Turkey and lettuce. No condiments. She did not taste it. Eating was a function, not a pleasure. Through the window, she could see the waiting area. Dorian Save was still there. He had moved to a different seat. His jacket was unzipped now. Underneath, she could see the outline of something bulky against his ribs. Not a phone, not a wallet. The shape was wrong. She chewed slowly, watching. He adjusted the jacket. The bulge shifted slightly. Weight distribution inconsistent with normal clothing. She finished her sandwich, threw the wrapper away, and returned to work. But her mind was already cataloging the new information. By 1:15 in the afternoon, the ER was still packed. The trauma from the morning had stabilized, but new patients kept arriving. Chest pain, abdominal bleeding. Severe allergic reaction. The flow never stopped. Senna entered Trauma Bay 1 with fresh supplies. She had been restocking crash carts all morning. Her hands moved on autopilot. IV kits, epinephrine, defibrillator pads. An alarm went off, high-pitched and urgent. She did not hear it. She did not know it had sounded. Dr. Holst turned and saw her standing there. His face darkened. He crossed the room in 3 strides. "What are you even doing in here?" His voice was loud enough that the other staff turned to look. Senna met his eyes, calm and steady. She reached for her notepad. She always carried it. A small spiral-bound notebook and a pen clipped to her scrubs. Before she could write, Holst swatted the notepad from her hand. It hit the floor and skidded under a medical cart. "I don't have time to read your little notes. This is an emergency department. We need people who can function in emergencies." The room went silent. A nurse standing near the monitors looked away. A resident shifted, uncomfortably. Odalis Reed, the head nurse, stood near the door, her expression carefully neutral. She said nothing. Holst pointed toward the exit. "Out! Go restock something. That's what you're actually here for." Senna did not argue. She did not sign. She bent down and retrieved her notepad from under the cart. She straightened, looked at Holst once more. Her face gave nothing away. Then she turned and walked out. Behind her, through the glass window of the trauma bay, she could see the team returning to work. Someone said something. Laughter rippled through the room. She walked down the hallway. Her footsteps were silent on the linoleum floor. Her hands, holding the notepad, were steady. But there was a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with breathing. She reached an empty corridor and paused at a wall-mounted terminal. These terminals were scattered throughout the hospital. Staff used them to check lab results, order supplies, access patient charts. Senna logged in with her credentials, but the screen she navigated to was not part of the hospital system. It was embedded within it, hidden behind layers of security that looked like routine administrative access. She typed quickly. Alert escalated. Subject Dorian Sev confirmed. Behavioral markers, 4 of 5 observed. Postural compensation, stress response, environmental scanning, concealed object detected. Recommend immediate containment. She hit send. The message disappeared. The screen returned to a generic hospital interface. She logged out and continued walking. It was 2:47 in the afternoon. Outside the hospital, 6 black SUVs pulled into the emergency bay. The vehicles moved in unison, precise and deliberate. They parked in a formation that blocked both vehicle lanes. Doors opened simultaneously. Men and women in dark suits emerged, some in tactical gear, all wearing earpieces and badges clipped to their belts. They were not police. They were not paramedics. They were Secret Service. Inside the ER, a nurse glanced out the window and froze. She tapped the shoulder of the nurse beside her. Both of them stared. "What the hell is that?" A receptionist at the front desk stood up, confused. She watched as agents moved toward the entrance with military precision. 2 agents took positions at the doors. 4 more entered the building. Patients in the waiting area looked up from their phones. A mother pulled her child closer. An elderly man adjusted his glasses, frowning. The atmosphere shifted. Something was wrong. Agent Quinlan Trident entered first. He was 43 years old, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a dark suit and a tie that had been loosened slightly during the drive. Behind him, 2 armed agents in tactical vests flanked the doorway. Dryden scanned the room. His gaze moved across faces, checking, cataloging. He approached the front desk. "I need to speak to your senior staff immediately. This facility is now under federal authority. No one leaves until we say otherwise." The receptionist stammered. I don't understand. What's happening?" Dryden did not repeat himself. He turned to the agents behind him. "Secure all exits. No one in or out. I want a staff roster pulled up in the next 2 minutes." One of the agents moved to the nurse station and began accessing the computer. Another spoke into his radio. "Perimeter is set. Main entrance secured." Patients began murmuring. A man stood up, indignant. "You can't just come in here and lock us down. This is a hospital." Dryden turned to him. His expression was calm but absolute. "Sit down, sir. This is a federal matter. You will cooperate or you will be detained. Your choice." The man sat. Nurses and doctors emerged from trauma bays, drawn by the commotion. Odalis Reed stepped forward, her face pale. "What is going on? Who are you?" Dryden pulled his badge and held it up. "Secret Service. I need to speak to hospital administration. Now." Odalis blinked, trying to process. "To administration? That's Mr. Farrow. Gideon Farrow. He's the hospital administrator. I can call him. Do it." She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking. The call connected. "Mr. Farrow, you need to come to the ER, right now. There are federal agents here." Secret Service. They're locking down the building. She hung up and looked at Dryden. He's on his way? Dryden nodded. He turned to the agent at the computer. Do we have the roster? The agent nodded. Pulling it up now. Dr. Holst emerged from Trauma Bay 1, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation. He approached Dryden with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. What's the meaning of this? You can't just storm into a hospital and start giving orders. Dryden looked at him. And you are? Dr. Merrick Holst, senior trauma surgeon. I run this department. Not anymore. As of 2 minutes ago, this facility is under federal jurisdiction. Step back, doctor. Holst's jaw tightened, but he did not move closer. What are you looking for? Dryden did not answer. He turned back to the agent at the computer. Do we have facial recognition access? The agent nodded, already running it. Dryden pulled out his own tablet and began scrolling through files. He was looking for someone specific, a face, a name, a call sign. Gideon Farrow arrived, breathless and disheveled. He was a man in his late 50s, balding, with glasses that sat crooked on his nose. He looked at the agents, then at Dryden, then at the locked doors. His voice was high-pitched with panic. What is happening? Why are federal agents in my hospital? Dryden turned to him. Mr. Farrow, I need to speak with you privately. Now. Farrow nodded quickly. Of course. Yes, my office is. Follow me. Dryden gestured to 2 agents. Secure this area. No one leaves. No exceptions. He followed Farrow down a hallway, away from the crowd. Odalis Reed trailed behind them, unwilling to be left out. Dryden allowed it. They entered Farrow's office. It was small and cluttered, filled with paperwork and half-empty coffee cups. Dryden closed the door behind them. Mr. Farrow, I need you to listen carefully. We are looking for a federal asset embedded in this facility. She transmitted a priority alert 47 minutes ago. I need to know where she is, right now. Farrow stared at him. Federal asset? We don't have any federal employees here. This is a civilian hospital. Dryden's patience was thin. She is here. She has been here for 16 months. Her presence was classified. You were not informed. That was intentional. Odalis spoke up, her voice shaking. What does she look like? Dryden pulled up a photo on his tablet and turned it toward them. The image showed a woman in her late 20s, dark hair pulled back, pale blue scrubs, no expression. Farrow leaned in, squinting. That's Senna Kale. She works in support services. She's deaf. She restocks supplies. Odalis nodded, her face going white. She's been here over a year. She doesn't talk to anyone. She does her job and leaves. Dryden's expression hardened. Where is she now? Odalis hesitated. Probably the supply room. That's where she usually is. But she's not anyone important. She's just support staff. Dryden's voice was cold. Take me to her. Now. They left the office. Dryden moved quickly, his agents falling into step behind him. Farrow and Odalis struggled to keep up. Staff members lining the hallway stared as the procession passed. Whispers spread. Dr. Holst stood near the nurse station, watching. His face was a mask of confusion. He stepped forward as they approached. What's going on? Who are you looking for? Dryden did not slow down. Out of the way, doctor. Holst did not move. Are you looking for Senna? The deaf girl? Dryden stopped. He turned to face Holst fully. His expression was unreadable. Step aside. Holst's mind was racing. None of this made sense. Senna, the woman he had just humiliated, in front of his entire team, the woman he had called useless. They reached the supply room. The door was closed. Dryden paused outside, listening. Inside, there was silence. He pushed the door open. Senna Kale was kneeling on the floor, organizing IV kits into a storage bin. Her back was to the door. She did not hear them enter. Her hands moved with the same methodical precision they always did, each item placed with care. Dryden stepped into the room, making sure he was in her line of sight. He waited. Senna looked up. She saw him. Her expression did not change. No surprise, no fear. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her knees. Dryden raised his hands and began signing in American Sign Language. His movements were fluid, practiced. Sentinel. We need to move you. Now. Senna signed back. Sev? Dryden nodded. Detained. You flagged him in time. Senna exhaled. It was a small release of tension, barely noticeable. She signed again. Confirmed, Dryden signed. IED, pipe bomb. Low grade, but lethal. You called it. Behind them, Odalis and Pharaoh stood frozen in the doorway. Pharaoh's mouth hung open. Odalis covered her mouth with one hand. Dr. Holst pushed past them, staring at the scene. What the hell is going on? Dryden turned. His voice was sharp, professional, and devoid of emotion. This woman is a federal intelligence asset embedded in your facility under classified operational authority. She identified a credible domestic threat earlier today and prevented a potential mass casualty event. The words hung in the air. Holst's face drained of color. Pharaoh made a choking sound. Odalis took a step back, her hand still over her mouth. Dryden continued. Her presence here was authorized at the highest levels of the federal government. Any interference with her duties is now under federal review. He turned back to Senna and signed. We need to debrief you. Let's go. Senna nodded. She walked to her locker, retrieved her tablet, and locked the door. She turned toward the exit. As she passed Dr. Holst, she did not look at him. Her face was calm, unreadable. She walked past him as if he were not there. Agents formed a protective perimeter around her, 2 in front, 2 behind. Dryden walked beside her. They moved through the ER in silence. The staff lining the hallway stared. The woman they had ignored, the woman they had mocked, now surrounded by armed federal agents, treated as if she were the most important person in the building. Holst stood rooted in place, his hands trembling. His mind replayed the last hour in fragments, swatting her notepad to the floor, telling her she could not function in emergencies. The laughter from his team. She had just saved their lives, and he had humiliated her. Senna reached the exit. Dryden opened the door. She paused and looked back at the ER. Her eyes swept across the faces, the nurses, the doctors, Odalis, Holst. Then she stepped outside into the sunlight. The SUVs were waiting, engines running, doors open. She climbed. Into the back seat. Dryden followed. The door closed. The convoy began to move. Inside the ER, the staff stood in stunned silence. No one spoke, no one moved. Through the window, they watched the black SUVs disappear into traffic. If you know someone whose quiet work has saved lives without recognition, share their story in the comments. It reminds us all that heroism does not always announce itself. The conference room on the 3rd floor had no windows, 4 white walls, a long table, 8 chairs, a water cooler in the corner that had not been refilled in weeks. The fluorescent lights overhead cast everything in a flat, clinical brightness that made shadows impossible. Senna sat on one side of the table. Agent Quinlan Dryden sat across from her. 2 additional agents stood outside the door, their presence a silent barrier between this room and the rest of the hospital. The building was still locked down. Staff confined to their stations. Patients told to wait. No one in, no one out. Dryden placed a tablet on the table between them. The screen was dark. He did not turn it on yet. Instead, he raised his hands and began signing. Walk me through it. What did you see? Senna's hands moved in response. Smooth, deliberate. Each sign precise. First contact at 6:52 this morning. Male, mid-30s. Visitor badge 4471. Name listed as Dorian Sev. Dryden signed. What flagged him? Postural asymmetry. Left shoulder carried lower than right. Compensation pattern for concealed weight. Jaw tension. Rhythmic micro-clench every 4 seconds. Elevated stress response inconsistent with civilian hospital visit. Dryden nodded. He had seen her reports before, 16 months of them. She was never wrong, not once. Environmental behavior, eyes scanned exits, not people. Pattern suggested pre-planned extraction route. No interaction with staff, no inquiry at information desk. Behavior inconsistent with someone visiting a patient. Dryden signed. When did you escalate? Second observation. 11:43. He returned to the waiting area. Different jacket, same weight distribution, confirmed concealed object. Senna paused. Her fingers hovered in the air for a moment before continuing. I ran the badge number, Dorian Sev. Checked in at 6:41, claiming to visit a patient in room 304. No patient in room 304. Room is storage. Dryden's expression did not change, but his hands moved faster now. When did you send the alert? 2:46 p.m., after third visual confirmation. He adjusted his jacket. I saw the outline clearly. Cylindrical, 8 inches, concealed under left ribs. Pipe bomb configuration. Dryden turned on the tablet. He pulled up a series of images, security footage, time-stamped. He slid it across the table. The first image showed Dorian Sev entering the hospital at 6:41 a.m. The second showed him in the waiting area at 6:52. The third, taken at 11:43, showed him in a different jacket. The fourth image, captured at 2:38 p.m., showed him adjusting the fabric near his ribs. The bulge was visible if you knew what to look for. Most people would not have seen it. Most people were not trained to see it. Dryden signed. He had a concealed IED, pipe bomb, low-grade explosive, but enough to kill 15 people in that waiting room. Shrapnel would have traveled another 20 feet. Total casualties estimated at 22, including secondary injuries. Senna's face remained calm. Her hands signed a single question. Detained without incident? Yes. Your alert gave us 12 minutes. We had teams in position before he reached the trigger point. How many does that make? 17. In 4 years. Senna nodded slowly. 17 lives she had flagged. 17 threats she had identified before they became tragedies. 17 times she had been right. Dryden leaned back in his chair. He studied her for a moment before signing again. The staff here had no idea who you were. That was the point. They treated you poorly. Senna's hands paused. Then she signed. Visibility compromises. Effectiveness. If they knew, I could not do my job. Dryden's jaw tightened. Still, what happened today in that trauma bay was unacceptable. Senna did not respond. She did not need to. They both knew what had happened. The notepad swatted to the floor. The public humiliation. The laughter. Dryden signed. We need to do a full debrief. Start from the beginning. First visual contact. Walk me through every observation. Senna closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her hands began to move. 6:52 a.m. I was in the main corridor, pushing a supply cart. He entered through the east entrance. Gray jacket, jeans, visitor badge visible. I noticed the gate first, favoring his right side. Not injury, compensation. The room seemed to shift. The fluorescent lights dimmed in Senna's memory. She was no longer in the conference room. She was back in the hallway. Early morning. The ER just waking up. She saw him enter. Dorian Sev. Average height. Brown hair. Unremarkable in every way except for the small details that most people missed. His left shoulder sat an inch lower than his right. The fabric of his jacket pulled slightly on the left side. His jaw clenched in a pattern. 4 seconds. Release. 4 seconds. Clench. His eyes moved across the room, not searching, cataloging, exit, window, hallway, nurse station, exit again. Senna had slowed her cart, not stopped. Just slowed enough to observe. 3 seconds. That was all she needed. 3 seconds to catalog a dozen micro-behaviors that added up to a single conclusion. Anomaly. She continued past him. Did not make eye contact. Did not alter her route. She was invisible. That was her greatest asset. Back in the conference room, Dryden was taking notes on his tablet, his hands signed. Second observation. What changed? Time, interval. He left at 7:14, returned at 11:43. Different jacket, blue instead of gray, but same posture, same gait, same weight distribution on the left side. Why flag the jacket change? Senna's hands. Moved quickly now. Visitor behavior. Normal visitors do not leave and return in different clothing, especially not within 4 hours. Suggests intentional effort to alter appearance. Combined with all other markers, probability of threat increased to 73%. And the third observation? 2:38 p.m. He adjusted his jacket. I saw the object. Cylindrical. Metallic based on the way light reflected off the edge when fabric shifted. 8 inches long, 2 inches diameter, pipe bomb dimensions. Probability jumped to 91%. I escalated immediately. Dryden set down his tablet. He signed slowly. You saved 22 lives today. Minimum. Senna's hands did not move. She simply looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. Dryden continued signing. The hospital staff will be briefed. They will know who you are, what you did. Your cover here is burned. I know. You will be reassigned. New location, new cover, new identity. I know. Dryden paused. Then he signed, something he rarely allowed himself to express. You did good work here, Sentinel. Senna's hands moved in response. Just one sign. Always. There was a knock at the door. One of the agents outside opened it slightly. He spoke in a low voice. Sir, administrator is requesting a meeting. Wants to know what happens next. Dryden stood. He signed to Senna. Wait here. This will take a few minutes. He left the room. The door closed behind him. Senna was alone. She looked at her hands. They were steady. They had always been steady. Even 7 years ago, when the world exploded around her and sound disappeared forever, her hands had been the one constant. She closed her eyes. 7 years ago. Union Station. A Thursday afternoon in late September. The terminal had been crowded, commuters heading home, tourists taking photos, a street musician playing guitar near the west entrance. Senna had been 22 years old, fresh out of college, working her first real job as a data analyst for a consulting firm downtown. She took the train every day, same route, same time, routine. She had been standing on the platform, checking her phone, when she noticed him. A man in his 40s, wearing a heavy coat despite the warm weather. He stood near a trash bin, fidgeting with something in his pocket. His eyes kept darting toward the crowd, toward the exits, toward the clock. Senna had felt something shift in her gut. Instinct, unease. She did not know why. She just knew. She moved closer. Not too close. Just enough to see. His coat hung strangely. Too heavy, too stiff. His hands trembled. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the ventilation. She pulled out her phone, started to dial. Security, police, someone. Before she could finish, he pressed something in his pocket. The explosion was soundless in her memory now. But she remembered the shockwave, the heat, the force that threw her backward into a concrete pillar. She remembered the smell, burning plastic, scorched metal, blood. She remembered waking up in a hospital bed, white ceiling, machines beeping, a doctor standing over her, saying words she could not hear. His mouth moved. She understood the shapes, the expression on his face, permanent hearing loss, traumatic injury to both eardrums, irreversible damage. 37 people survived that day. Senna was one of them. 11 people died. She had seen the bomber. She had recognized the threat, but she had not acted fast enough. 3 months later, 2 men in suits visited her apartment, federal agents. They sat across from her at her small kitchen table and explained why they were there. You saw him before the explosion. You noticed the behavior, the details. No one else did. She had nodded. You read body language, micro-expressions, behavioral patterns. It is a skill, rare, valuable. She had waited for them to continue. We want to train that skill, sharpen it, use it. People like you can see what others miss. Your hearing loss does not diminish that. If anything, it focuses it. She had stared at them for a long time. Then she signed a single question. Why? Because the next bomber will not announce himself. He will blend in, look normal, act normal until he does not. We need people who can spot the difference, people who notice the small things. And you think I can do that? We know you can. The question is whether you want to. Senna had thought about the 11 people who died, the man she had seen, the call she had almost made. Yes, the training had taken 18 months, behavioral analysis, threat assessment, pattern recognition, surveillance techniques. She learned to read faces the way others read books, a twitch of the mouth, a flicker of the eyes, a shift in posture. Every movement told a story. She learned that most threats did not scream, they whispered, and if you listened with your eyes instead of your ears, you could hear them. Her first assignment had been a regional airport, 60,000 passengers a day, endless faces, endless behaviors. She had flagged 3 threats in 6 months, all confirmed, all intercepted. Her second assignment had been a transit hub, 4 months. 2 threats. Both stopped. Her third assignment had been St. Matthias Metropolitan Hospital. 16 months, 4 threats. Dorian Sev made 5, 17 total, in 4 years. The door opened. Trident entered, followed by Gideon Farrow, Odalis Reed, Dr. Merrick Holst, and 3 other senior staff members. They filed into the room, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and disbelief. Senna stood. She was no longer wearing her scrubs. One of the agents had brought her a jacket, dark gray, professional. A federal ID badge was clipped to the pocket. Her name, her photo, no title, just the seal of the Department of Homeland Security. Farrow sat down heavily, his hands trembling. Odalis remained standing, her arms crossed defensively. Holst stood near the door, his face pale, his jaw tight. Trident did not sit. He stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room. Senna Kale has been embedded in this hospital for 16 months as part of a classified domestic threat monitoring program. Her role was to identify pre-attack behavioral indicators in civilian spaces, hospitals, airports, transit hubs, anywhere mass casualties are vulnerable. Farrow opened his mouth to speak. Trident raised a hand. You were not informed of her presence because operational security required her to be invisible. The moment staff knew who she was, her effectiveness would be compromised. That was intentional. That was necessary. Odalis found her voice. But we had no idea. She never said anything. That was her job. Holst stepped forward. His voice was tight. So, we were supposed to just, treat her like she was undercover? How were we supposed to know? Dryden's eyes locked onto him. The room temperature seemed to drop. You were supposed to treat her like a professional. You failed. He turned to his tablet and pulled up security footage. The screen on the wall behind him flickered to life. The video began to play. The first clip showed the break room. 2 nurses sitting at a table. Senna in the background, pouring coffee. I don't get why they keep her. She can't even answer a phone. HR said it is a diversity initiative, whatever that means. The second clip showed Odalis tossing a crumpled supply request at Senna without looking. Senna picking it up, smoothing it flat. No reaction. The third clip showed Trauma Bay 1. Holst swatting the notepad from Senna's hand. I don't have time to read your little notes. This is an emergency department. We need people who can function in emergencies. The video paused. The room was silent. Dryden's voice was cold, controlled, sharp. She prevented a bombing today while being humiliated by the people she was protecting. Farrow made a choking sound. Odalis covered her mouth with both hands. Holst stood frozen, staring at the screen. Trident continued. The individual she flagged earlier today was Dorian Sev, age 34, known affiliate of a domestic extremist cell. He entered this hospital at 6:41 a.m., carrying a concealed pipe bomb. His intended target was the waiting area during peak hours. Estimated casualties, 22 dead, 18 injured. He turned to Senna. She stood quietly, her hands at her sides. She identified him at first visual contact, based on postural compensation, stress markers, and environmental scanning behavior. She flagged him for monitoring. She confirmed the threat through 3 separate observations over 8 hours. She escalated the alert with enough advance warning for federal teams to intercept him before detonation. Trident turned back to the staff. She saved every single person in that waiting room. She saved your patients. She saved your colleagues. She saved you. Holst's voice cracked. I did not know. Trident's response was immediate. You did not ask. The silence that followed was suffocating. Farrow stared at the table. Odalis wiped her eyes. Holst looked like he might be sick. Trident pulled up another document on his tablet. A formal review will be conducted into workplace conduct and ADA compliance violations at this facility. Federal contracts are under suspension pending investigation. The Department of Justice will determine whether this hospital met its legal obligations under federal disability law. Farrow's face went white. That could shut us down. That is the consequence of negligence. Trident turned to Senna. He signed. You are cleared to stand down. Rotation complete. Senna signed back. Thank you. She picked up her tablet from the table. She turned toward the door. As she passed Holst, she stopped. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her notepad, the same spiral-bound notebook he had knocked to the floor hours earlier. She placed it on the table in front of him. He looked down. On the page, written in her neat, precise handwriting, were the words, "I could always hear you, just not the way you thought." She walked out. The door closed behind her. Holst picked up the notepad with shaking hands. He read the words again, and again. His mind replayed every moment, every dismissal, every time he had waved her off, every time he had treated her like she was less than, like she was a burden. She had been protecting him, protecting all of them, and he had humiliated her for it. He sat down heavily. The notepad fell from his hands onto the table. Outside the conference room, Senna walked down the corridor. 2 agents flanked her. 2 more walked ahead. Their formation was precise, protective. She was no longer invisible. Staff lined the hallway. Nurses, doctors, residents, techs, all of them staring, whispering. That is her. The deaf girl. She stopped a bombing. She saved us. We had no idea. Senna kept her eyes forward, her expression neutral. She had learned long ago not to seek recognition. Recognition was not the point. The work was the point. They reached the main ER. Patients in the waiting area looked up. A mother holding a child, an elderly man with a cane, a teenager with a broken arm, all of them alive because of a woman they would never know. Trident walked beside her. He signed as they moved. Next assignment will be different. Higher profile, more risk. She signed back. I know, you have earned a break. 2 weeks, take them. Senna paused. She signed. Where? Anywhere, somewhere quiet. She nodded. They reached the exit. The glass doors slid open. Outside, the 6 black SUVs were still parked in formation. Engines running, doors open. Senna stepped into the sunlight. The air was cool, the sky was clear. She could not hear the traffic, she could not hear the wind, but she could feel it. The way it moved, the way it shifted. She climbed into the back seat of the lead SUV. Trident followed, the door closed. The convoy began to move. Inside the ER, visible through the glass, Dr. Merrick Holst stood, alone at the window. He watched the SUVs pull away. His reflection stared back at him. Hollow, broken. He had spent his entire career believing he knew what competence looked like, what value looked like, what strength looked like. He had been wrong. The woman he had dismissed as useless had just saved 22 lives, and he would have to live with that for the rest of his career. The SUV turned the corner and disappeared from view. Senna sat in silence. Trident handed her a new tablet. The screen displayed a file, classified, her next assignment, regional airport, high traffic, elevated threat level, start date, 2 weeks. She scrolled through the briefing, images, floor plans, security protocols. She memorized it all in minutes. Trident signed. Call sign. Senna looked at him. Her hands moved slowly. Still Sentinel? Trident nodded. Always Sentinel. She set the tablet down, looked out the window. The city moved past in silence. People walked on sidewalks. Cars stopped at lights. Life continued, ordinary, unaware. Most of them would never know how close they had come today. How a single woman, dismissed and ignored, had stood between them and tragedy. That was fine. She did not need them to know. She just needed them to be safe. The convoy drove on. Somewhere behind them, in a federal detention facility, Dorian Sev sat in an interrogation room. His pipe bomb had been disassembled. His plan had failed. His freedom was gone. And the woman who had stopped him was already thinking about the next threat, the next face in the crowd, the next anomaly waiting to be noticed. Because that was what Sentinel did. She watched, she waited, she saw, and when the moment came, she acted. Always. If there is someone in your life who does essential work without recognition, take a moment to acknowledge them. The people who keep us safe are not always the ones we see. Sometimes they are the ones we overlook. Consider subscribing to hear more stories that remind us who the real heroes are. The SUV moved through midday traffic with mechanical efficiency. Senna sat in the back seat, watching the city pass in silence. Buildings, pedestrians, traffic lights. The ordinary rhythm of a day that had been anything but ordinary for her. Dryden sat beside her, reviewing files on his tablet. He had not spoken, signed, in several minutes. There was work to be done: paperwork, reports, debriefings. The machinery of federal bureaucracy ground on, even after threats were neutralized. The vehicle turned onto a highway on-ramp. Traffic thinned. The city gave way to industrial corridors, warehouses, distribution centers, the landscape of commerce that existed behind the facade of urban life. Senna closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, the memory waited. It always waited. Union Station, September 23rd, 7 years ago. She had been standing on the platform, waiting for the 4:47 train, her phone in her hand, emails from work, a text from her mother asking about dinner plans, ordinary concerns, the kind that felt important until they stopped mattering entirely. The platform had been crowded, rush hour, commuters eager to get home, tourists consulting maps, a street musician playing guitar near the west entrance, his case open for donations. The sound of his music had filled the space. She remembered that. The last music she would ever hear. The man in the heavy coat had been standing near the west entrance. She remembered noticing him because the coat made no sense. It was 78 degrees outside, warm for September. No one wore heavy coats, but he did. She had watched him from the corner of her eye, not staring, just aware. He kept reaching into his pocket, pulling his hand out, reaching back in, a nervous habit, or something else. His eyes moved constantly, scanning faces, checking exits, looking at the clock mounted on the far wall. 4:43, 4:44, 4:45. Senna had felt her pulse quicken. Instinct. The kind of animal, awareness that evolution had built into the human brain for moments exactly like this. Something is wrong. Pay attention. Move. She had stepped closer. Not too close. Just near enough to see. His coat hung strangely. Too stiff. Too heavy. The fabric did not move naturally. Underneath, something bulky pressed against the lining. She pulled out her phone, started to dial 911. Her fingers moved across the screen. 911. Before she could press call, the man looked directly at her. Their eyes met. He knew. His hand moved into his pocket one final time. The explosion had no sound in her memory anymore, just impact, heat, force. She remembered being thrown backward, her body hitting a concrete pillar, the world tilting sideways, pain blooming across her skull like a dark flower opening. She remembered the guitarist's case flying through the air, coins scattering like rain. She remembered a woman's mouth open in a scream she could not hear. She remembered smoke and fire and the feeling of the ground beneath her, solid and unyielding. Then, blackness. She woke in a hospital bed 3 days later. White ceiling, fluorescent lights. A doctor standing over her, his mouth moving. She could not hear him. She could not hear anything. The silence was absolute, crushing, a void where sound used to be. She tried to speak. Her throat worked. Her vocal cords vibrated, but she could not hear her own voice. The feedback loop that made speech natural was gone. She sounded wrong to herself. Alien. The doctor wrote on a whiteboard and held it up. "Can you read this?" She nodded. He wrote again. "You were injured in the bombing. You have suffered permanent bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. Traumatic perforation of both tympanic membranes. Cochlear damage. Irreversible." She read the words, read them again. Tried to make sense of a reality where sound no longer existed. The doctor wrote more. "You will need to learn sign language, lip reading, adaptive communication strategies. We have resources, support groups, counselors." Senna stared at the whiteboard. The words blurred. Tears she did not remember, crying wet her cheeks. The doctor wrote one more sentence. "I am sorry. 11 people died in the bombing. 37 survived. Senna was one of the survivors, but the person she had been before the explosion did not survive. That version of herself died on the platform, along with the 11 others. What remained was something different, someone different. The first month was the hardest, learning to navigate a world without sound, learning that doorbells could not wake her, that car horns could not warn her, that fire alarms were useless if she could not hear them. She learned sign language with desperate intensity. 8 hours a day. her hands becoming fluent in a language her ears would never hear. She learned to read lips, to watch faces, to interpret the world through visual information alone. She learned that people treated her differently now. Some spoke louder, as if volume could penetrate her damaged ears. Some avoided her entirely, uncomfortable with disability. Some treated her with pity she neither wanted nor needed. She learned that the world was not built for people like her. Announcements in train stations, intercoms in hospitals, phone calls, casual conversations in crowded rooms, all of it inaccessible now. She learned to be invisible, because being visible meant being pitied, and she refused to be pitied. 3 months after the bombing, 2 federal agents visited her apartment, Special Agent Lowell Kimura and Special Agent Patricia Vance. They sat at her small kitchen table and explained why they had come. Agent Kimura signed as he spoke, his movements practiced and respectful. You saw the bomber before detonation. You noticed behavioral anomalies. No one else did. Why? Senna signed slowly, still learning the rhythm and flow of the language. I do not know. Something felt wrong. His coat, his behavior, the way he watched the crowd. Agent Vance leaned forward, also signing. You read body language, micro-expressions, environmental cues. It is a rare skill. Most people see without observing. You observe. Senna did not respond. She waited. Agent Vance slid a folder across the table. We are building a program. Behavioral threat assessment. Embedded surveillance in civilian spaces. We need people who can identify pre-attack indicators before they escalate. People who notice what others miss. Senna opened the folder. Inside were documents, program outlines, training schedules, security clearances. The word classified stamped across every page. She signed. Why me? Agent Kimura signed back. Because you have already proven you can do it. You saw the threat. You recognized the danger. You were the only person on that platform who noticed. And because your hearing loss does not diminish that ability. If anything, it enhances it. You are not distracted by sound. You focus entirely on visual information. That makes you more effective, not less. Senna looked at the documents for a long time. Training schedules, operational protocols, psychological evaluations, background checks. She signed. What would I be doing? Watching, observing, flagging threats. You would be embedded in high-traffic civilian locations. Airports, transit hubs, hospitals, anywhere large numbers of people gather. Your job would be to identify individuals exhibiting pre-attack behavioral patterns and alert response teams before incidents occur. And if I say no, then you say no. This is voluntary. But we believe you could save lives, many lives, lives like the ones lost at Union Station. Senna thought about the man in the heavy coat, the 11 people who died, the call she had almost made but never completed, the guitarist whose music she would never hear again. She signed. When do I start? The training had been exhaustive. 18 months at a classified facility in Virginia, behavioral psychology, threat assessment, pattern, recognition, surveillance techniques, counter-surveillance, operational security. She learned to read faces the way linguists read ancient texts. Every twitch, every flicker, every micro-expression cataloged and analyzed. Fear looked different from anger. Guilt looked different from anxiety. Pre-attack stress had a signature. If you knew what to look for, you could see it. She learned the physiology of threat behavior. Elevated cortisol levels produced visible changes, pupil dilation, increased blink rate, facial flushing, postural rigidity, micro-tremors in the hands. She learned that threats did not announce themselves. They blended, they waited. They moved through crowds like water, invisible until the moment they struck. She learned that her deafness was not a limitation. It was an asset. While others were distracted by conversations, announcements, background noise, she focused entirely on what mattered: body language, facial expressions, movement patterns. She became exceptional. At it, her instructors called her a natural. Her accuracy rate climbed: 67%, 79%, 88%, 94%. By the time she graduated, she could identify pre-attack behavioral markers with 97% accuracy. Better than anyone else in the program, better than agents with decades of experience. They gave her a call sign: Sentinel, the Watcher, the Guardian, the one who sees. Her first field assignment had been Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. 60,000 passengers per day. Endless faces, endless behaviors. She had worked there for 6 months, embedded as a janitorial staff member. She flagged 3 credible threats, all intercepted, all confirmed. A man carrying explosive precursors and checked luggage, intercepted at security. A woman with forged credentials attempting to access restricted areas, detained by airport police. A teenager with detailed terminal maps and security protocols on his phone, flagged for FBI, in monitoring. 3 threats, 3 lives saved, maybe more. Her second assignment had been Penn Station in New York. 4 months, 2 threats, both stopped before execution. Her third assignment had been St. Matthias Metropolitan Hospital. 16 months, 4 threats before today. Dorian Sev made 5. 17 total in 4 years. 17 lives saved. Hundreds more protected. All without recognition. All without acknowledgement. That was the job. That was the calling. The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage. Federal building, secure location. The convoy parked in formation. Doors opened. Agent stepped out. Trident signed to Senna. "We need to debrief with the director. Full report. Then you are cleared for leave." Senna nodded. She followed him into the building, through security checkpoints, down corridors lined with photographs of past directors and notable operations, into an elevator that descended 3 levels below ground. The debriefing room was windowless, soundproof, secure. Director Calloway was already there, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Former CIA. 28 years of service. She had helped design the program that recruited Senna. Calloway signed as she spoke, her movements fluid and practiced. "Sentinel, good work today. Walk me through it from the beginning." Senna spent the next 2 hours recounting every detail, every observation, every decision point, every behavioral marker she had identified. Calloway listened without interruption, taking notes on a tablet. When Senna finished, Calloway signed a single phrase: "Exceptional work, Sentinel. 17 confirmed threats in 4 years. 0 false positives. 0 missed threats." "Your record is unmatched," Senna signed back. "Just doing my job." Calloway smiled slightly. "Few people do it as well as you. Take your 2 weeks, rest, recover. Your next assignment briefing will be sent on day 12. Senna signed. "Where?" "Regional airport. Moderate. Traffic. Elevated threat level due to recent geopolitical tensions. Details to follow." Senna nodded. The meeting ended. Senna was cleared to leave. Dryden walked her to the exit. They stood in the lobby, agents moving past them on official business. Dryden signed. 2 weeks. Actually rest. You have earned it." Senna signed. "I will try." Dryden hesitated. Then he signed something he rarely allowed himself. "You should be proud of what you do, the lives you save, the threats you stop. It matters." Senna looked at him. Her hands moved slowly. "Pride is not the point. The work is the point. The people who go home safe because I was watching. That is the point." Dryden nodded. He understood. He had always understood. They parted ways. Senna walked to the street and hailed a cab. She gave the driver an address. Not her apartment. Not yet. St. Matthias Metropolitan Hospital. The cab pulled up to the main entrance 25 minutes later. Senna paid and stepped out. The black SUVs were gone. The lockdown had been lifted. The hospital had returned to normal operations. Ambulances pulled up to the ER bay. Patients walked through the automatic doors. Life continued. Senna stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching. This building had been her workplace for 16 months. The place where she had been invisible, dismissed, humiliated, and the place where she had done her job anyway, where she had protected people who never knew they needed protecting. She entered through the side entrance, staff entrance. She still had her badge. It had not been deactivated yet. The hallways felt different now, not physically, but the energy had changed. Staff saw her and stopped, whispered, pointed. Word had spread. Everyone knew now. The deaf nurse, the federal agent, the woman who saved them. She walked past the supply rooms where she had spent countless hours organizing medical equipment, past the break room where nurses had gossiped about her as if she were furniture, past the trauma bays, where Dr. Holst had dismissed her. A young resident approached her nervously, a man in his late 20s. She had restocked his crash cart a dozen times. He had never thanked her, had barely acknowledged her existence. He signed awkwardly, unpracticed. "Thank you. For what you did. For saving us." Senna signed back. "You are welcome. Learn sign language properly. It will make you a better doctor." The resident nodded, embarrassed but sincere. "I will, I promise." Senna continued walking. She reached the bulletin board in the main corridor. Someone had pinned a note there, handwritten on lined notebook paper. Unsigned. Her name was Senna Kale. She saved 17 lives in 4 years. "We never said thank you." Beside it, someone had added another note. "She worked here for 16 months. We treated her like she was invisible. We were wrong, we are sorry," and another. "I saw her restock supplies every day. She was always there when we needed something. I never said thank you. I should have." The bulletin board was covered in notes, dozens of them, apologies, gratitude, regret, shame. Senna read them all. Then she continued walking. She found Odalis Reed in the nurse station, organizing charts. Odalis looked up, startled. Her face was blotchy, red-rimmed eyes. She had been crying. Senna approached. She pulled out her notepad and wrote, "I am sorry you did not know. It was necessary for the work." Odalis read it. Her hands shook. "I am the one who should apologize. The way we treated you, the things I said, the way I dismissed you. I threw crumpled papers at you like you were nothing. And you were saving our lives. You were protecting us. And I was terrible to you," Senna wrote again. "You could not have known. That was the point of the cover. If you had known, I could not have done my job effectively." Odalis shook her head, tears spilling over. "That is not an excuse. You deserved basic human decency regardless. Deaf or not, federal agent or not, you are a person. You deserved respect, and I failed to give you that." Senna wrote one final note. "You can give it to the next person, the next one who seems different, the next one who does not fit your expectations. See them. Value them. That is how you make this right." She handed the note to Odalis and walked away. Behind her, Odalis held the paper with trembling hands, reading it over and over. Senna found Dr. Merrick Holst in his office. The door was open. He sat at his desk, staring at nothing. Her notepad, the one she had left on the conference room table, sat in front of him. He had been reading it, the words she had written. "I could always hear you, just not the way you thought." Senna knocked on the doorframe. He looked up. His face was pale, hollow. He had aged 10 years in a single day. She entered and wrote on a fresh page of her notepad, "May I sit?" Holst nodded. She sat across from him. He tried to speak. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I do not know what to say. I am sorry feels inadequate, insulting even. I humiliated you. I dismissed you. I swatted your notepad to the floor in front of everyone. I called you useless. I said you could not function in emergencies. And you were saving lives. You were protecting us. You were doing work I cannot even comprehend. And I treated you like you were a burden, like you were less than human." Senna watched him. Then she wrote, "You did not know who I was. You made assumptions based on incomplete information. That is human nature." Holst shook his head violently. "That is not an excuse. That is never an excuse. I am a doctor. I am supposed to see people. Really see them. Not make snap judgments based on disability or appearance or anything else. I should have treated you with respect regardless of who you were or what your job was. You deserve basic human dignity, and I failed. I failed as a doctor, and I failed as a human being." Senna wrote carefully, choosing her words. "Yes, you did." The bluntness of it landed like a physical blow. Holst flinched, his eyes closed. He nodded slowly. She wrote again, "But I do not need your apology. I need you to learn from this, to treat the next person better, the one who seems invisible, the one who does not fit your idea of competence or value. See them, acknowledge them, respect them. Do that, and you will have made this right." Holst opened his eyes. They were wet. I will. I swear to you I will. I am enrolling in sign language classes. I am implementing new protocols for staff training, disability awareness, communication accessibility. I am making sure this never happens again. Not here, not on my watch. Senna wrote. Good. That is all I ask. She stood to leave. Holst stood as well. Wait, please. I need to know. When I knocked your notepad to the floor, when I said those things, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Senna paused. She wrote slowly. I was thinking that I had a job to do, that my feelings did not matter, that protecting you mattered more than my dignity. I was thinking that I would finish my shift, file my report, and continue my work, because that is what I do. And how did you feel? Senna looked at him for a long moment. Then she wrote 2 words. Very small. Holst's face crumpled. He sat back down heavily. Senna left the office. Behind her, she could hear him crying. Actual sobs. The sound of a man confronting the worst version of himself. She walked through the ER one final time. She passed the trauma bays where she had delivered supplies in the chaos of the morning, the crash carts she had restocked, the monitors she had watched while staff assumed she was oblivious. She passed the break room where she had been gossiped about, the supply room where she had hidden her real work behind the facade of menial labor, the corridors she had walked in silence while the world moved around her in noise she could not hear. Staff members watched her pass. Some nodded respectfully. Some looked away in shame. Some tried to speak, to apologize, but she kept walking. She had said what needed to be said. The rest was up to them. A young nurse approached her as she neared the exit, the same one who had gossiped about her in the break room, the one who had called her a diversity hire, the one who had laughed. The nurse signed awkwardly, her hands shaking with the unfamiliarity of the language. I am sorry. I was cruel. I was wrong. Thank you for saving us, even though we did not deserve it. Senna signed back, fluid and graceful. Everyone deserves to be saved, even people who are cruel. Learn sign language. Practice it. Use it. Make the next deaf person who works here feel valued. That is how you apologize. The nurse nodded, tears streaming down her face. I will. I promise. Senna continued to the exit. She pushed through the doors and stepped into the late afternoon sunlight. The air was cool. The sky was beginning to turn orange and pink with the approaching sunset. She could not hear the traffic or the wind or the voices of people passing by. But she could see everything. The way light moved, the way shadows shifted, the way people walked, talked, existed in the world. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking back at the hospital. 16 months of her life, hundreds of hours, thousands of observations, 4 threats identified and stopped. And today, the 5th. Dorian Sev. 22 lives saved, by her count, by her work, by her willingness to be invisible and dismissed and humiliated in service of something larger than herself. She turned away from the hospital and hailed a cab, gave the driver her apartment address, settled into the back seat and watched the city pass. Her apartment was small, 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, a couch, a table, a bed. Everything she owned fit into 2 suitcases. That was intentional. Mobility was part of the job. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space smelled stale. She had not been home in over 16 hours. She opened a window to let fresh air circulate. She sat on the couch and opened her laptop. Email, messages from the agency, logistics for her next assignment, flight information, cover identity, operational parameters, regional airport, high traffic, 3 terminals, 45,000 passengers daily, elevated threat assessment due to recent geopolitical tensions, start date, 14 days. She read through the briefing, memorized floor plans, security protocols, staff rotations, terminal layouts, peak traffic times, vulnerable locations. By the time she closed the laptop, she knew the airport better than most people who worked there. She showered, changed into comfortable clothes, made herself a simple dinner, pasta with olive oil and garlic, no salt. She could not taste salt anymore. One of the strange side effects of the bombing, damaged taste receptors. She ate anyway, fuel for the body. She sat by the window and watched the sunset complete its transformation. Orange faded to purple, Purple faded to deep blue. Lights came on across the city. Life continued. She thought about Holst, about Odalis, about the young nurse, about all the people at St. Matthias who now knew the truth, who now understood what they had missed. She wondered if they would change, if they would treat the next invisible person with more respect, more dignity, more humanity. She hoped so. But she did not count on it. People rarely changed unless forced to confront themselves. And even then, change was slow, incremental, imperfect. But it was something. And something was better than nothing. 2 weeks passed. Senna spent the time resting, reading, training. She ran every morning, 5 miles, consistent pace. Physical fitness was part of operational readiness. She could not afford to be slow or weak or unprepared. She practiced her observational skills, coffee shops, parks, grocery stores, libraries, anywhere people gathered. She watched, she cataloged, she identified. Anomalies. A man in a coffee shop who checked his phone every 30 seconds. Anxiety, waiting for a message, possibly meeting someone, possibly nervous about the meeting. A woman in a park who kept looking over her shoulder. Fear, or paranoia, or guilt. Possibly being followed, possibly running from something. A teenager in a grocery store who avoided eye contact with staff. Shoplifting. Confirmed when security followed him out and recovered stolen merchandise from his backpack. None of them were threats, but the practice kept her sharp, kept her skills honed, kept her ready for the next assignment. On the 13th day, she received her final briefing. Detailed floor plans, staff photographs, security camera locations, threat assessment parameters. She memorized it all. On the 14th day, she packed her bags, 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on, everything she needed. Clothes, toiletries, her tablet, her notepad, her federal ID. She locked her apartment and took a cab to the airport. Not the airport where she would be working, a different one. She was flying to her new assignment, a city she had never visited, a cover she had never used. She checked in, passed through security, found her gate. She sat and watched the crowd, families traveling, business professionals typing on laptops, tourists excited for vacations, elderly couples holding hands, all of them unaware of the woman sitting among them, the woman whose job was to keep them safe. Her flight was called. She boarded, found her seat, window, 3rd row. She preferred windows, better vantage point, better situational awareness. The plane filled, passengers stowed luggage, buckled seatbelts, settled in for the flight. Senna watched them all, reading faces, cataloging behaviors, looking for anomalies. A businessman 3 rows back, nervous flyer, white knuckles on the armrests, elevated breathing, normal. A mother with 2 young children across the aisle, exhausted, overwhelmed, trying to keep the children entertained. Normal. An elderly man in the row behind her, sleeping already, hands folded peacefully on his lap. Normal, no threats, no anomalies. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives. The plane pushed back from the gate, taxied to the runway, accelerated, lifted into the air. Senna watched the city shrink below. St. Matthias Hospital was down there somewhere. The people she had protected, the people who had dismissed her, the people who now knew the truth. She did not think about them for long. That chapter was closed. A new one was beginning. The plane climbed through clouds, leveled off. The seatbelt sign turned off. Senna closed her eyes, allowed herself to rest. 2.5 hours until landing. 2.5 hours until the next assignment began. 2.5 hours of peace. She thought about the work, the calling, the purpose. 17 threats stopped. Hundreds of lives saved. Thousands more protected indirectly. And she was just getting started. The plane landed smoothly. Senna deplaned, collected her luggage, took a cab to a small apartment the agency had arranged. 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, identical to the last one, identical to all of them. She unpacked, organized her belongings with the same precision she had used to organize medical supplies at St. Matthias. Everything in its place, everything aligned, order, control, preparation. The next morning, she reported to the airport. Her new cover was custodial staff, night shift, midnight to 8 a.m., the quietest hours. The hours when threats often moved unseen because security was tired and passengers were sparse. She was issued a uniform, blue coveralls, ID badge, custodial services, her photo, her cover name, Mara Finch. She began her rounds, pushing a cleaning cart, emptying trash bins, mopping floors, wiping down surfaces, moving through terminals like a ghost. And she watched. A man in Terminal B lingered near a security checkpoint, watching, timing, memorizing patterns. She noted him, logged his appearance, tracked his movements. A woman in Terminal C carried a bag that sat unevenly on her shoulder, weight distribution wrong, contents shifting irregularly, possibly equipment, possibly weapons, possibly nothing. She noted her, logged her appearance, tracked her movements. A teenager in Terminal A avoided cameras with practiced ease, moving through blind spots, keeping his head down, deliberate, intentional. She noted him, logged his appearance, tracked his movements. None of them were immediate threats, but Senna built profiles, watched patterns, waited for confirmation or dismissal. 3 days into her assignment, she flagged her first anomaly. A man in his 40s, visitor pass, claiming to pick up a family member, but he had been in Terminal B for 6 hours. No family member had arrived. His eyes scanned security patterns with military precision. His hands fidgeted with something in his jacket pocket, never pulling it out, just touching it, confirming its presence. Senna transmitted the alert. Federal response team moved into position. Plain clothes, blending with travelers. Converging slowly, professionally. The man was intercepted at 3:47 a.m., found carrying detailed terminal maps, security schedules, and camera blind spot locations. Intent, reconnaissance for a future attack. Prevented before it reached planning completion. 18. That was her count now. She continued her work, night after night, week after week, watching, waiting, protecting people who would never know her name. 2 months into the assignment, she flagged threat number 19, a woman attempting to smuggle components through security using diplomatic credentials. Intercepted. Prevented. 4 months in, threat number 20. A teenager with detailed attack plans on an encrypted phone, flagged, monitored, arrested by FBI before execution. 6 months in, threat number 21. A man carrying forged credentials and tactical maps. Intercepted. Prevented. The work continued. The threats never stopped, but neither did Senna. 1 year into the airport assignment, she stood in Terminal A at 3:47 a.m. The terminal was nearly empty, a few red-eye travelers sleeping in chairs, a janitor mopping floors in the distance, a security guard making his rounds with practiced boredom. Senna pushed her cleaning cart toward a trash bin. She emptied it methodically. Trash bag, tie, replace, move to the next. The same routine she had performed 1,000 times. The same movements, the same precision. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Each action deliberate, each motion controlled. She thought about the supply room at St. Matthias, the rows of shelves, the boxes aligned at perfect angles, the labels facing forward, the order she had maintained while chaos swirled around her. Different location, same principle, order, precision, control, purpose. She finished emptying the trash and moved to the next terminal. Her cartwheels squeaked slightly on the polished floor, the sound she could not hear but could feel through the vibration in the handle. As she walked, she passed a family sleeping in chairs near Gate 17, parents exhausted, 2 children curled up between them, waiting for a 6 a.m. flight to somewhere, a vacation maybe, or visiting family, or returning home. They did not notice her. They did not need to. She was not there to be noticed. She was there to keep them safe. And she would, for as long as the job required, for as long as threats existed, for as long as people needed someone watching. Sentinel, always watching, always ready, always unseen. The terminal lights hummed overhead. The floor gleamed under fluorescent brightness. The world moved in silence around her. Passengers dreaming, security walking rounds, cleaning staff maintaining order. And Senna Kale moved through it all, invisible and essential, exactly as she was meant to be. Her hands gripped the handle of the cleaning cart, steady, unwavering, the same hands that had organized medical supplies for 16 months, the same hands that had flagged 21 threats and counting, the The same hands that had saved lives no one would ever thank her for. She pushed the cart forward, one step, then another, through Terminal A, toward Terminal B, continuing her rounds, continuing her work, protecting, watching, serving, without recognition, without acknowledgement, without sound, just the work, always the work, because some people are called to be seen, and some people are called to see. Senna knew which one she was. She had always known. From the moment she woke in that hospital bed 7 years ago, unable to hear, unable to understand how her life would continue, she had been searching for purpose, searching for meaning in the silence, and she had found it. Not in being seen, not in being acknowledged, not in being celebrated, but in seeing, in protecting, in standing between ordinary people and extraordinary danger, in being the watcher no one knew, they needed, the guardian no one recognized, the sentinel in the silence. She reached Terminal B and began emptying trash bins there. Same routine, same precision, same invisible purpose. A businessman hurried past her, pulling a rolling suitcase, checking his watch. Late for a flight. Stressed. Normal. A young woman sat alone near Gate 23, crying quietly. Relationship troubles maybe, or family loss, or just exhaustion. Normal. An elderly couple walked slowly hand in hand toward their gate, moving carefully, supporting each other. A lifetime of partnership visible in every step. Normal. All of them safe. All of them protected. All of them unaware of the woman who watched, who cataloged, who assessed, who kept them alive. Senna finished Terminal B and moved to Terminal C. The sky outside was beginning to lighten, dawn approaching. Her shift would end in 2 hours. She would go home, sleep, eat, train, return. The cycle would repeat, day after day, week after week, year after year, until the next threat, and the next, and the next, until her accuracy slipped, until her skills faded, until she could no longer do the work that defined her. But that day was not today. Today she was Sentinel. Tomorrow she would be Sentinel, and every day after, for as long as she was needed, because the work was not finished. The threats had not stopped. The world still needed watchers, and Senna Kale was the best watcher they had. She pushed her cleaning cart through Terminal C, past sleeping passengers, past closed shops, past empty gates waiting for morning flights. The city outside began to wake, lights turning on, traffic increasing, life resuming its ordinary rhythm. And in the silence of the terminal, Senna continued her rounds. Invisible, essential, unwavering, exactly as she was meant to be. The people you pass every day, the ones who seem ordinary, who fade into the background, who do their work without asking for attention, they might be the ones keeping you safe. They might be the ones who see what you miss. They might be the heroes you never knew you needed. If this story reminded you to look more carefully at the people around you, to value the work that goes unnoticed, share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories that reveal the extraordinary and the overlooked.